Today on RPGs Beyond the Roll, fighters, they're not just beginner characters anymore. Welcome to RPGs Beyond the Roll. I'm Brian.
I'm Derica.
And between us, we have more than 50 years of experience playing Dungeons and Dragons.
On both sides of the screen.
That is terrifying to think of, but I figured it out just a few minutes ago. Wow, that's a lot of D&D. But fighters, they were always like, play a human fighter, make that your first character. Oh, by the way, yeah, this channel's existed for a while. We just decided to start making content again, and we're going at it a little different. We're going to be more conversational. Treat it like, we're just sitting across the table from you talking. But anyway, that's what fighters were.
Yeah, but now, and by now, we're referring to Dungeons and Dragons version
2024, 5th edition.
Right.
Yep.
And we intend to do more than just that particular role-playing game on this channel.
Sure. Over time, yeah.
For this particular talk, that's what we're referring to.
Right. The fighter is like the most ubiquitous, well-known standard character, but a lot of people think of them as kind of boring. And I will admit, in older editions of D&D, like 1st and 2nd edition, they were a little boring, but they weren't because, see, there's some differences from older editions to newer editions. And some of you may know this, some of you may not. But in the older editions, you didn't automatically get magic weapons and stuff like that. Usually you only needed a magic weapon if something was resistant to magical weapons. So a fighter had all this stuff.
Resistant to mundane weapons.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that. I'm going to get my words all talked up. It's okay.
That's why there's two of us.
But what would happen is characters didn't have these super amazing abilities. Most times it was items that they found. And I don't just mean like a magic weapon. I mean like there was weird stuff. We have books this thick of items that you could get in those editions that gave you abilities, gave you the ability to do really cool things. Today, a lot of stuff like that is built into the classes and into the subclasses, because it separates those classes that much more. Now, here's something else I want to say. Everybody's experience with D&D is different. Everybody has their own ideas on how D&D works, and guess what? Everybody's right. There's no wrong way to do it if you're having fun. So when we give an opinion or make a statement, a lot of the time it's based off of our experiences, which may differ from yours. And that's okay. Because if yours is different, let us know in the comments what your experience was. Just, be polite. Don't be rude. No name calling or anything like that. We can all learn from the experience, and everybody gets better at playing this game, which is like a hobby now. It's not really a game anymore. It used to be a game. Now it's a hobby.
All right, so back to fighters. And one of the cool things about this newest edition and what they've given to fighters is a lot of versatility. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to just be plain old vanilla fighter. You can go in any path direction that you choose. Mm-hmm. And that way you can play a fighter for one game and then play a fighter for another game and have them be completely and totally different characters.
That's true. And that's not even taking into account subclasses. But with the subclasses that they have, it's even more. Now, something else I want to get into is we're not going to be number crunching and how to make the best build, this and that. We're not going to do that. We'll talk about some of the abilities that fighters get, and we'll talk about probably the lower level stuff, because let's be honest, a lot of people don't get past like level 10 in classes in D&D anymore because the games are over before you get there.
In our opinion, the best build is the build that gives you the most enjoyment. Yep. And sometimes the numbers belie that.
Yeah.
Our good friend Kelly played a bard who was completely crippled by really shitty ability scores.
We rolled for abilities and hers were horrible.
We were just like, oh, Kelly, do you really want to play this? Like, she was given the option to re-roll.
I think she had like a 6 wisdom, an 8 intelligence. I want to say it was maybe a 10 constitution and 8 or 10 for strength and maybe 12 or 14 for dex. But she did have, I believe, an 18 charisma to start. That was her only stat that was good, and she played
and
the
she's like,
hell out of that
I'm just
character.
Gonna roll with it. And she did such a fantastic job, and she had so much fun. So don't let the numbers get in the way of you having enjoyment. Enjoyment is the key here. This is a game.
And this is a funny thing when you really think about it. Like, people get crazy about those numbers. And sorry, this is our first video in a while, so there's going to be a lot of just a smattering of information. We're basing it on the fighter, but still, there's a lot of things going on. Getting crazy about the modifier abilities is a little silly because let me just put it in perspective. If you have a 10 in an ability versus a 14 in an ability, which could mean a lot of difference in die rolls, but it means 2. Just 2 on the modifier. That's it. Now, on Constitution, for a character that needs Constitution, sure, every little bit helps. But at the end of the game, when you're level 20, without some of the extra stuff that you can do, it literally means 40 more hit points, which could mean 1 more hit in combat, maybe 2 hits at level 20. But at that level, it doesn't make that much difference. It's not the end of the world if your character doesn't have perfect stats. And I'm saying this out loud because I need to hear it too. I'm a bit of a power builder, bit of a power gamer, and I sometimes forget that, well, the numbers aren't the most important thing. And I have this happen to me all the time. We built a character for a game that Derek is DMing, and me and a friend made sister characters. They were related. And we planned this out for 6 months, 8 months before the campaign even started. Yeah. We were playing a different campaign. And we started the campaign. Now, I did the biggest mistake ever, and I'll talk about this in another video, but I had this character in my head all ready to go. We were level 5, had a preconceived idea of how I wanted this character to be. The numbers that I rolled for her worked out beautifully well the way I wanted them to, but the actual rolls in game were horrible, and they still continue to be pretty darn bad. My in-combat rolls are bad. Her perception skills are bad. Even though she has a +6 perception, I rarely get past a 10. And that's with applying guidance. I get like 10s and 11s for perception rolls with guidance applied with a +6. I don't know what it is. It's not the character's fault, but you never know what the game's going to bring to you. And that's kind of what Derek was saying with the ability scores. Kelly made the most out of these low ability scores. I would see her do like a wisdom check or something, like a perception check, and I'm like, oh God, this is not going to go. And she rolls a natural 20.
Yeah.
So even with a -2, she got an 18. Yeah. I was just like, that's amazing.
So I guess what we're trying to say with this little segue is that there's always room for failure. Mm-hmm. And so give yourself some grace and give your character some grace. That don't have that preconceived in your head that they're the strongest thing ever, because sometimes the rules are not going to be in your favor. And that's okay to have that weakness, because there's always room for failure, but there's always room for success as well.
But some of the most fun comes when failure is right around the corner. Like, you have a strong chance of failing and you succeed. But also, sometimes when you fail, it's a very entertaining moment. Like, I have played so many characters that failed in the most amazing ways and made it into something fun that continued role play in the game. If you get mad and if you get pissed off every time you roll a 1, you're going to not like this game much at all.
Yeah.
And conversely, if you get mad when you don't roll a 20, that's even worse. Every time you don't roll a 20, you get all upset. Well, just find a different game to play, because this really isn't the right game for you.
Yeah, just roll with it. Pun intended.
Oh boy.
If you can just be malleable and make the best of each situation, whether it's a good or a bad roll, then you're going to have so much more fun with this game. So
absolutely.
Back to fighters.
Yep.
And since we started with talking about ability scores, let's talk about ability scores for fighters.
The most important ones, and it depends on the type of fighter you want to be, are dex and strength. And you don't want both necessarily. You want one or the other. That's the power builder in me talking. You can do it however you want.
And there's reasons for this. So let's say you want your fighter to be an archery specialist, somebody that's going to just snipe people left and right and always hit the target. You're going to want to be dex heavy. You're going to want to have a really dexterity. You're going to counter that?
Yep.
All right, go for it.
You might want some strength too. Great Weapon Master is a new thing that lets you add damage to heavy weapons, including a longbow. You have to have a 13 strength in order to take that. So while you do want your dex to be the highest, you still don't want to forget about strength. See, in older editions, that's what people did.
It was all or nothing. Yeah.
Strength was basically a dump stat just so that you weren't encumbered. Okay. But you also didn't get to add your dexterity modifier points, meaning like if you have a 14 dex, you get 2. If you have a 16, you have 3. All the way to 20 where you have 5. You didn't get to add those to your damage on dex-based characters. Now you can. making a very, very different thing. And I'll talk about that in just a second too.
All right. So conversely, if you are a melee, sword and board, in your face, stab them with the pointy end type of character, then you're more than likely, and not always, and I know there's caveats for this as well, want to be more strength-based.
Not really. That brings me to the point that I was trying to make. The only time that you want to be a strength-based, and this is the power builder talking here, the only time that strength-based is advantageous is if A, you just want to be the strongest guy in your party, or B, you want to use a two-handed weapon. Because otherwise, in every single instance, being dex-based is going to be better than strength-based. Except for that. And let me explain. If you want to use a two-handed sword or a two-handed great axe, you definitely want to be strength-based. And then you can probably wear full plate armor, which means your dex doesn't really matter except for dex saves, but that's a whole other thing. Okay, you want to have some amount of dex or else dex saves are going to kill you. But that way you can wear full plate armor. There's no dex modifier added for full plate armor. So you have an 18 armor class right off the bat. And you can use that two-handed weapon. You can use the Great Weapon Master properties, and you can add damage to that. So you're getting a 2d6 or a 1d12, or if you're using like a Bardiche or something like that, a 1d10 for your damage, plus your strength modifier. Plus, you can add your proficiency bonus if you take the Great Weapon Master, Great Weapon Master feat. But let me give you a different example. Let's say sword and board, right? You're holding a shield and a longsword. It's a 1d8 weapon plus your strength modifier. Your armor class is 18 plus 2 for your shield makes you 20. Sounds really, really good. But your dex saves are probably really, really low. And there are a lot of skills fueled by dexterity and not as many fueled by strength. Somebody's going down our street with a squeaky wheel. So you have really good athletics, but you don't have good much of anything else. Now, conversely, if you were to take that same idea, use a rapier instead of a longsword, now make it dex-based. You can basically drop your strength. You will and use studded leather armor, just a standard stuff. Once your dex is 20, you have a 5 modifier plus the 2 from studded leather makes 17, plus your shield makes 19 armor class, right? 19 armor class is one lower than 20 for the other guy, but you're still going to do the same damage because you're going to be doing 1d8 damage plus your modifier for your ability score. And you're going to have fantastic dex saves. You're going to be able to be stealthy. There's so many more things you can do. So this is where there's so many different ways to make a fighter. The old idea of just put on heavy armor and wear a sword and board, it doesn't have to be that way. There's versatility. That's a good thing.
So basically, there's a lot of decisions to make,
Oh, yeah.
and those decisions are going to help guide you make other decisions further down the road. Now, some of this is going to be dependent on how your game starts.
Sure.
So different tables, the DM, GM, whatever you want to call them, sets the groundwork and in most cases, and I suggest this, the collective, the entire party, everybody who's playing agrees to a set of terms. So
Session 0 is a good idea.
right. So lots of times it'll be, okay, you can roll your stats and then you get to place those numbers, which is appropriate to your character build that you have in your mind. Other times is you roll your stats and they are where they are.
Yeah, depends on the RPG, depends on the DM.
So let's say you had a concept that you wanted to have the heavy strength-based fighter, but the ability rolls
You have a 6 strength.
didn't go in your favor. Well, you have that flexibility now to still have a really heavy-hitting fighter,
Yep.
but have them use their dex instead.
Yep, most definitely.
So another stat that is favorable to have relatively high, particularly if you're going to be in face-to-face combat, is Constitution.
Absolutely. Constitution does a couple of things. It gives you hit points. It gives you better Constitution saving throws. And just in general makes you, from a role play perspective, more robust of a person. You could be this big, strong guy with a 20 strength, but if you have only a 6 Constitution, that kind of makes me question, did you skip leg day or something? It doesn't work right to me. You need to have the high Constitution. And that works for dex-based characters as well as strength-based characters.
Speaking of role play, often many sessions begin in a tavern.
Yep.
And if you want to be that person that can just slug them down one by one up at the bar and still remain standing,
6 con ain't going to cut it.
you're going to want a high constitution.
Yep. And then there's the other 3 stats: wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. Now, everybody's going to have their own ideas on these things. I don't believe in truly dump stats anymore, except most of my dex-based fighters have an 8 strength. I'll just be honest. They seem to be pretty low, 8 or 10. But charisma can actually be really important, because think about it, intimidation is based on charisma. Now, I would argue that it could be based on strength, but it's not. So it's based on charisma. Persuasion is another one. Useful in social situations. Intimidation. I have actually seen people pull an intimidation check in the middle of combat. They'll say to the DM, like, I want to try to intimidate this guy. The DM lets them roll an intimidation check, and they turn tail and run away. It's been super effective. And that's with people that maybe had a +1 modifier to their intimidation. They just got a lucky roll.
There also are some magics that are charisma based. So if you're trying to resist their effects, you're going to have to make a charisma save.
Yep.
And if you have a really crappy charisma, then guess what?
Your save's going to
You're
suck.
out of luck.
Yeah. And then we come to intelligence and wisdom. Now, these 2 used to always be my dump stats when I played RPGs online. In real role-playing, I think they're both very important, because if your character is really, really dumb and really, really non-insightful, it could be fun for a while, but I don't think you're going to have the best time overall, unless that's the kind of character you're going for, in which case that's totally fine. But also, you got to remember, intelligence helps with investigation checks, arcana checks, history checks, and things like that. And wisdom helps with the number 1 role that your DM's likely to make you do, and that's perception checks. I also like it for insight checks, but insight is not really like a lie detector. It's more like you get a little information that maybe the player didn't think of or didn't realize when you do a really good insight check. So yes, even on a fighter, I try to get at least a 12 or 14 in both of those scores. Just gives a little extra boost. That little extra bit is always a good thing to have.
Back to roleplay, those stats do help with roleplay as well.
Oh, absolutely.
If you want to be the completely clueless one, then it's okay to have a really low wisdom. One of my favorite portrayals of a high wisdom, low intelligence character is Talzin's Furball.
Oh, God. I forget. From Critical Role, Clay. Caduceus Clay? Caduceus. Yeah, it's been a while. Sorry.
And that's from Critical Role. Hopefully you're familiar with them. If not, it's a great show to watch. It is not the answer to all things D&D, but
it's entertainment.
But it certainly does help you see some variety of how to role play. And I think
that's true.
think lots of times people get lost that this is a role playing game.
Yeah, not ROLL. ROLE.
Right. So that he did such a great job being super wise, but completely clueless at the same time.
Yep.
And that was really awesome. So you do have variables with your abilities, but please, in role play your stats.
I was just going to say that. I have seen far too many people that have like a 6 charisma because they dumped it, and they're playing themselves off like they're the best looking fairy princess ever and can seduce anybody. And I'm just like,
nope.
How? That's just bullshit. I don't like it when people do that. If you're going to put the stat there, play it, because that can be fun too. And if you dump all your social stats, like your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, you better play dumb. You better play like you get lost in a cardboard box and you are fugly and not good in social situations. If you can't play that way, don't dump those stats.
Along those lines, as both a DM and a player, I really appreciate it when people role play their stats, but are also self-aware. So for me, an example, if I want to play a really high charisma character, I know I'm going to have to push it. I'm going to have to stop being so polite and quiet and really get up in there and engage as that character. If you don't have that ability, if you are just far too naturally timid as a person, then
Know your limits.
know your limits and make some allowances for your character that's going to work well with how you like to play and how you are comfortable as a person.
I have a lot of trouble playing low charisma characters.
Yes. Brian will sometimes build a character with low charisma, but he can't play it that way. And so it's not appropriate.
Yeah. And I always feel awkward about it. It always bothers me. So I usually take a hit in some of my other stats just so that I can get at least a 12 in charisma, at least a 12, just to be slightly above average.
And when we're talking about these numbers, 10 is basically the baseline.
It's average.
That's average. So an average person has a 10 in all their stats. Right. They're not a weakling. They can lift stuff, but they're not super strong. They can walk in a straight line without falling over their feet. So, they're enough nimble. Yep. And they can have a conversation with a person without looking
They can
like
take a hit or two
fool.
without being knocked on their ass.
They're not going to catch a cold just by stepping out their front door. So remember that 10 is not bad. 10 is normal. 10 is average. So anything above that means you're just slightly elevated, and anything below that means you're a little less. You're a little lacking.
I try not to put negatives into my social abilities anymore. I used to always do that. Now I don't anymore at all. Mostly because to me, wisdom is really important for skills. I love skills. I'm a skill monkey. I build skills in everything. I made a fighter build that had like 4 different skill proficiencies and I think 4 expertises and 6 more proficiencies.
It's like my fighter.
Yeah.
Reba, she's
level 13. She's already got
craft everything.
Yep. Well, that's crafting. I'm talking about actual skill proficiencies.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah.
But she has all the tool proficiencies. Yeah, like everything.
All right, so let's get back to our fighters, shall we? I think
now, keep in mind, we're not even talking about some of the abilities that fighters have, but I want to talk about one that they gained in 2024 that I think is absolutely fantastic. Well, 2, actually, that are absolutely fantastic. One is weapon masteries. These things changed the game so much. I have been playing around with the weapon masteries. If you don't know what they are, different weapons have different abilities. Like, for instance, a short sword has Vex. Vex means if you use that weapon in combat and you hit with it, your next attack, whether it's this turn or another turn, gets advantage on the attack. Now, keep in mind, they took away, which they were never really in the rules, they took away the flanking rules from 2024, and we don't play with them anymore. We use them in the old version of 5e, even though it was an optional rule, and we took them away because the weapon mastery stuff really does change it. It also gave fighters and martial classes something that's unique and cool that's just for them, because not every class gets weapon masteries, and some only get one, or like a couple, whereas fighters end up with several. That's the first thing that's really, really cool. The other one is tactical something. I forget. I got to look it up. See, she said we were going to need Google Foo. She wasn't wrong.
So he talked about the short sword
Tactical
having
mind.
Vex. All of the weapons have a different property.
Right.
And so you want to use that as part of your strategy as to what is going to benefit your character, or probably more ideal, the party as a whole,
Right.
to make your weapon selection and what your character is going to focus on.
Right. For instance, another weapon mastery is graze on the greatsword. So here might be a reason to take greatsword and be that strength-based fighter rather than a dex, because what graze does is if you swing at a creature or anyone, if you attack using that greatsword and you miss, you still do your ability modifier damage. That's kind of awesome. You're going to do damage every single time you swing that weapon. That's incredible. Now, it's not as overpowering as you might think, but there are certain situations that it is phenomenally good. For instance, you're fighting a caster who has concentration going on a spell. You get to hit him every single time, which forces him to make that saving throw. Eventually, he's gonna roll low. It's bound to happen. It's a numbers game. It literally is a numbers game. Like literally, that's what D&D is. It's a numbers game. So the more times you can force him to make that save, the better off he is. Now, that's something that you have to be strength-based in order to be able to do. And there's other advantages to having that greatsword. Like I said before, the Great Weapon Master, you can do a lot more damage. And eventually, fighters get 4 attacks per round. If every one of those is hitting, that makes a caster have to do 4 saving throws every time you have a turn.
And with grays, they can all be misses and still be hits.
And you can still do a lot of damage to somebody. That's still, if you have a 20 strength by the time you get those 4 attacks and you miss every single time, you still did 20 points of damage to them. And you missed. You could roll 4 ones in a row and still do 20 points of damage. I mean, that just didn't happen in the old editions.
All right, so what was the second thing they added to fighters?
Tactical Mind. It uses your second wind. Second wind was a really cool ability. It's actually an ability to self-heal, where you roll a die and you get to add that plus your con modifier to your hit points. Really, really cool. And you get to use that so many times per short rest or a long rest. Well, they added an extra functionality to it, and this is Tactical Mind. This is the one weakness that fighters have had for a long time. People say that, oh, they suck in social situations and anything that requires skill checks because they don't get as many skills as other classes unless you build them a certain way. But Tactical Mind kind of makes up for that. It lets you use, let me make sure I get it right. You roll a D10. So you get to add a D10 to any ability check that you make. Let's say you're talking to somebody and you're trying to persuade them into something. You roll badly, just not great for your check. Then you get to roll a D10. Let's say you rolled a 10 on it. You just turned a bad roll into a potentially good roll. You could make a fail into a success on any of your skills. And you can do that the number of times that you have for second wind for every short rest and long rest, which means if you do the standard, like 2 short rests and then a long rest in a day, you're actually recharging that. You get like 6 uses of it in a day. No, 4 uses of it in a day. Yeah. You get to use it when you wake up. Let me think about this now. You get to use it when you wake up. That's 2. Then you have a short rest. You get to get it back. That's 4. Then you have another short rest later in the day. That's 6. And then you get your long rest. You could get potentially 6 uses of that per day added to any skill check that you do. As a fighter, that's like bard stuff right there. Like that's crazy.
So everything that we've talked about thus far is just the basics of just a plain old fighter. This is what comes with the class without any bells and whistles added. But wait, there's more.
Let's say you just want to be like the greatest fighter ever and be showy and flashy. Be a champion. You get extra crits. What that means is you're normally a 20 is a crit for everybody. In older editions, your weapon determined your crit range, but in 5th edition, not that way anymore. So now a 20 means a crit, but with the champion, it goes to 19 or 20. And I think it actually drops to 18 or 20 once you get to 20th level, which every point down is 5% higher chance of a critical hit. Critical hits are not quite as strong as they used to be, but they still are very, very powerful. So it's something that you kind of want to strive for. Champions are probably the simplest. I played a champion my first time playing 5e, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I played a standard sword and board because I wanted the armor class because I understand defense. Believe me, this is one thing I'm very good at is getting high defenses and being protected as a character.
Yeah, sometimes, particularly for the frontliners, high defense is the best offense.
Yep. My level 5 bard paladin that I'm playing in Derek's campaign right now, just the other day, hit 26 AC. Now, granted, they don't keep it there forever, but 26 AC. I mean, come on, at level 5? All legit, too. No bullshit in the rules. I don't do that.
All right, so what's another option for fighter?
We're not done. Champion is the most simple. Then, if you want to be a little bit more tactical and have more versatility, Battlemaster. Without a doubt, I think Battlemaster is probably the best fighter out there because you get to use maneuvers, which means you can add extra damage to hits. You can do cool things like trip your opponent, push them away. You can even, if you're a dex-based, or even if you're not, you're into stealthing, you can actually get one that adds your maneuver die to your roll for stealth. Now, think about that for just a minute. Let's say you're dex-based, right? You're level 5 character, right? Just nice and simple. At level 5, you could potentially have an 18 or 20 dex. Let's say you have an 18 dex, just making it simple. That's a +4 modifier. Now, let's say because you have proficiency in it because you took proficiency, that's +3. So now you have a 7 to your stealth, right? So say you roll a 10 on your stealth check, but that's not quite high enough. You can then add a maneuver to that using your D8 die at that point, potentially making that a 25. And you can use a second wind on top of that, potentially making it a 35 stealth as a fighter at level 5.
Now, maneuvers are also really cool because they can help you strategize your turn.
Yep.
And by that, I mean there are different aspects to each turn during combat. There are your actions, and as a fighter, sometimes you have multiple actions per turn.
Depends if you do action search.
Right, that's what I said, sometimes. Then there are bonus actions, there's movement, and there's reactions. So many times the bonus action category is kind of limited to a fighter.
Yeah, they don't have that
as far
many.
as how many options they have available to them. But there are maneuvers that you can get that will fulfill that bonus action slot.
Right.
So you've already used your actions and you can use a maneuver now to use your bonus action.
And there's maneuvers for everything. Like I just gave the one about upping your stealth, but you have maneuvers that can raise your attack, like your 2-hit. You have maneuvers that raise your damage. You have maneuvers that can trip your opponent, disarm your opponent. You can switch positions with allies. There's a lot of different things, and it makes it very tactical, very strategic.
Yeah.
Really adds a lot of extra depth to the fighter. And all those maneuvers come back on a short or long rest. So you get tons of them as time goes on, and the die gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the fighter types. Then some other ones, we're not going to go over every single one. Some other ones. Let's say you want to be a fighter, but you want to use some magic too. Eldritch Knight. Really pretty cool. A lot of people are very familiar with the Arcane Trickster because Sam Rigel played an Arcane Trickster in Critical Role. And that is a rogue that can do magic. Well, this is the fighter counterpart to that. This is a full-on fighter at level 20. You're going to have 4 attacks per round, but you also can cast a fireball. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, I played one for a short period of time in a campaign. The campaign ended a little early, but I played one. It was actually really interesting having some of those abilities. The trick here is now you become multi-ability dependent or mad. And it makes me mad to have to be multi-ability dependent because you need intelligence to get the saving throws high enough on your spells to make it work. But the workaround for that is choose spells that don't require a saving throw. There's a bunch of them. Usually it turns into utility spells. Like I have a character that I'm working on now that is a rogue fighter. On purpose, I took fighter because I needed certain things. I'll talk about this build someday. Oh yeah, this is awesome. But I'm keeping it a secret because I don't want the other players that I play with to know what the character's coming up yet. And sorry, my phone keeps making noise. We have cameras that are going off because, birds and squirrels and stuff run around our house and make noise. But anyway, where was I going with that?
You were talking about the mad with the
right.
Eldritch Knight.
To be a good Eldritch Knight, you would need to raise your intelligence more. But if you use spells that don't require it to be high to get that high DC, then you can still use all those spells. And like I said, I'm doing that on a current character where a lot of their spells are utilitarian stuff. And I even took ritual spells for some of them so that they can cast them as many times as they want. It just takes 10 minutes to cast. A good one that I used is Alarm. I can cast Alarm as much as I need to because that's just the way the spell works. It's not concentration. It lasts for so long and you can just keep casting it. So that's kind of a way to be strategic and make your fighter have a little bit of uniqueness and difference. And that's just with Eldritch Knight. You can take all kind like the Wizard Adept and stuff like that, and you can get spells even just as a straight up fighter without even taking any other classes.
So these things that we've been talking about right now are the fighter subclasses.
That's the subclasses, yeah.
On top of that, you can have feats.
Oh, yeah.
That was what Brian was alluding to, that can add to different aspects. So you can customize a fighter to your heart's content.
Feats are actually an optional thing in 5th edition. Most DMs allow them, but there are some that don't. So if your DM doesn't allow that, then obviously some of that customizability is going to be a little bit more limited. But if you can take feats, wow, it's amazing what you can do. You can make the least fightery fighter ever. Like you can literally make somebody that has a ton of spells and lots of different abilities that they can do. They're still a fighter and they're still pretty good at killing stuff, but they can do so many other things too. Or you can focus all those feats into being more fightery. It really depends. And that's what's awesome about 5th edition and 2024 5th edition. I know some people really don't like it. I love what they did with it. They actually improved almost every aspect of the game, making it more interesting and making every class interesting, because in past editions, you always had like, oh, well, this is the class to be more powerful for this, and this is the class that's really good. And, you know, it was always that way. People still think that mages are the most powerful. I don't know about that, because a party of mages doesn't have anybody standing in front of them with a sword and board to protect them.
So hopefully we've given you a good concept of how fighters just aren't mundane anymore, and you can make them as unique and individual as you wish.
So we're always looking for suggestions on what kind of topics you'd like to hear us talk about on this channel. And being that we took a long hiatus from it and we're coming back because we're in a brand new house, we have a huge studio to work in now. We're trying to bring this back because we love this kind of content. We love making this kind of stuff and, you know, talking with people. So tell us what kind of topics you'd like us to talk about, or what class do you want to hear us talk about next? Because I think between the two of us, we played almost all of them at some point or another. So we can talk about that. So let us know in the comments below. And I need to come up with a good closing. I don't even have a good closing. Oh, may the rolls be ever in your favor. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.